Welcome to my podcast, Why Didn't Anyone Tell Me This? With my guests, we are discussing health issues, questions you may have about your health, and debunking some of the many myths around our health. And I am so pleased to launch the series on embracing age for World Menopause Day 2024. Last year in season 1, I talked to a number of inspiring people about embracing age, including Jessica Hepburn, Joe Mosley, Siobhan Daniels, Rachel Lancaster, David Woods, and the founder of the Blue Tit Swimming Group, Sian Richardson. And earlier this year, I spoke to Susan Saunders. You can catch up on these podcasts anytime via my website or on any podcast channels. Over the last few months, I have been researching embracing age for my next book, and I have interviewed 50 women over 50 to talk about so many positive aspects of being over 50. And all the 5 women who are in this series of podcasts on embracing age have been interviewed for my book. So you'll soon be able to hear more about their stories in my book. So who better to kick off this series than the wonderful Kate Codrington, author of Second Spring. Kate is a pioneering pro-aging activist, author, menstrual health menopause mentor, speaker, workshop facilitator, artist, yoga Nidra guide, podcaster, and has been a therapist for over 30 years. Wow, that is so inspiring. She is author of 2 books, and we're going to talk about both of these today. Second Spring, the self-care guide to menopause, and just out, the Perimenopause Journal. Kate's mission is to change the way we regard menopause and show how we can relax into our own inner authority through our cyclical nature and menopause process. She refuses to take herself too seriously and try to never take on anything that is not pleasurable and delicious. I love that. She is also an artist currently weaving textiles, words, story, and stitch. She's in her second spring, which means post-menopause, and has deep gratitude for the education that the menopause process has gifted her. It was ouchy for sure, but it did what years of therapy did not. It took her head out of her arse. I love that. Welcome, Kate.
My head coming out my arse.
I know, I love it. I love it. So I think you and we're both a bit rebellious, and I think it's going to be a really great conversation for us to talk about embracing age. Now, Kate, I love to start by asking my guests what led them to the career they've been doing now. And you do so many things. So please tell us about what's led you to the passion for the work that you are doing now.
Well, it's all about me, of course. It's all about trying to understand what the hell is going on with me, and then looking around and really not finding nuanced, complex, connected answers in the mainstream. So my journey started really with trying to connect to my body and develop some kind of capacity for intimacy with other humans. And that took me into body psychotherapy. And I studied with Gerda Boysen in the 1990s. And Gerda Boysen, I'm just going to give her a wave the flag for Gerda Boysen, because she's an absolute pioneer in the body mind sphere, and is now largely forgotten, mostly because she used touch, she used massage, which in the psychotherapy world was seen as, transgressive. There were messy, it was expected to be sexual, it was expected to be messy boundaries, and worse, it was feminine. So she was using, she was working with fascia, which is now like wildly popular and fashionable in all spheres, in the 1950s in Oslo. So yeah, go look up Gerda Boysen and biodynamic work, people. So I did not 1 but 2 body psychotherapy trainings, and that kind of led me into a kind of comfort with myself, and that gave me a really good position to meet other people and to work with clients. Next up, it was the revolution of parenthood, of conception, pregnancy, and birth, which is obviously a whole other rite of passage. And for that, after that, I had experienced a lot of the disconnection and difficulty with that. And again, really not finding the active birth movement wasn't really there. Doulas were something that only very special people had, it wasn't for the kind of ordinary people. I found work Well Mother with Suzanne Yates, which is a combination of Eastern and Western approaches to massage to posture and movement. And then along came perimenopause with quite young children. So I had my second child when I was 40. So I was kind of in perimenopause and postnatal all at the same time, which is a holy mess, which as anybody who's been there will know. So I started to kind of look around at what the hell was going on. And I think perimenopause hadn't been invented then. I don't know what your experience is. It didn't really exist. There was menopause and then you were old. So the only people who were speaking to that was the abdominal massage gang, the Arvigo Mayan abdominal massage people, who were talking about that as something significant and transformative. So I went off to learn. I didn't learn the Arvigo style. I learned what's it called? Abdominal sacral massage. And that kind of really connected me into femininity, actually, and what the hell that means. Living in a patriarchal culture and really not liking what women were supposed to look like, or not being able to relate to any of this stuff. Really struggling with definitions of motherhood and being absolutely in service to my little people. It took contact and time spent in peaceful locations and really connecting with my womb, with my roots, to really kind of get a grip on my own version of how I want to be female, which is cyclical. And we'll talk a lot more about what that means for people. And then that took me into Uma Dinsmore Thule's womb yoga, and finally into my connection with Red School. And basically, I've followed Alexandra Pope around like a little dog for the last 20 years, because she came up with this wonderful construction of the seasons of menstruality and the seasons of life, and the way that we ebb and flow through life. And this made sense to me, that this an approach that is both intellectual and grounded in physical lived experience of our lives. It's instantly understandable, intuitively understandable for most people, and also incredibly deep and useful in terms of helping us to understand how to look after ourselves. Yeah, so that kind of covers it. Oh yeah, and then that led naturally into the yoga nidra. And we'll talk more about that later.
Yeah, and I know what you say about menopause wasn't invented when you went through it. I've heard many women say that, and I know some people think, what do they mean? But it was just not talked about. There's still many cultures where it's not talked about, and they don't have a word for it in some countries. And for me, I did know, because I work in women's health. And actually, as I was going through menopause, one of my students was doing a project on looking at a very large data set of women, and looking at those that had done quite a bit of exercise during their menopause. And so for me, that really set me in motion. I've always exercised, but I always say to everyone, I exercise through my menopause. But I was just reading my student's dissertation at the right time, so it worked really well.
It makes perfect sense, though. Sorry, it makes perfect sense because you're in a time of transformation, right? And when you're moving, your energy cannot stay still. So you're actually going with the flow to exercise through your perimenopause. Totally makes sense.
It does. It really does. And obviously, you and I, many of us now working in this area, really want to encourage women to think about all of their well-being, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, today. And I know you talk about this in your books. But let's just ask the question in this series. I'm going to ask everyone the same question, and I've interviewed you very kindly. I interviewed you for my book, so I've interviewed 50 inspiring women over 50 who have such motivational words. I was totally motivated by what everybody said. So this was the first question I asked you all. Kate, what's your view on aging?
I think aging is a process of refinement. It's a process of becoming your own super nerd, super nerds on ourselves, so that we might become vulnerable. Our vulnerabilities become more obvious for sure, but we become more refined at knowing what is pleasurable, what suits us, and how to care for ourselves, and what makes us happy. And we can just drop the rest so that we can live more expansively as we age.
Yeah, I think expansion for me is something that I came across several years ago when I'd been to some workshops by Gozia Gorna, who talks about expansion a lot. And that's exactly what going to be one of the themes of my book. I think some people, men and women, as we get older, they stay in more, they become more recluse. But those 50 women I've interviewed are the total opposite. They are expanding, they're out there, they're living their best life. And in your two beautiful books, so Second Spring and the Perimenopause Journal, you talk about the perimenopause in a very beautiful way and beyond the perimenopause, especially. So, can you tell us more in your words about how you feel about perimenopause and postmenopause?
Few words. I mean, the books are both that their purpose is to reassure people that they're not going mad. But instead in a process of being upgraded. We get an upgrade in perimenopause. And if you have watched Doctor Who, which for people outside the UK is an excellent television program, you will see that when the Doctor regenerates, it's not easy. No, there's a lot of drama that goes on. But this drama that happens through perimenopause is purposeful and we can trust it. We can trust it because its purpose is for us to let go of what is not serving us. Is to literally our armor to melt, to break away, for our conditioning to break away through that process, so that we can live more to our purpose postmenopausally.
Here. I totally agree. So on that front, there is a narrative in the UK. It's great in the UK that compared to when we were going through our perimenopause, it wasn't really discussed. And now it is discussed, which is a great advance. But there is a narrative that menopause is a deficiency condition and that the only way to solve this terrible thing that's going to happen to us is to take hormone replacement therapy. So what's your view about that?
Um, I think it's a huge disservice to us. HRT is great. It works for hot flushes. It works for mood regulation in some people, some of the time, not always. Sometimes it's really helpful. But to say that it's the only way through is effectively keeping us in our place, keeping us on nice, fluffy estrogen clouds so that we keep on people pleasing, we keep on being toxically productive and giving hyper attention to other people's needs and completely disregarding our own, I think. And it takes our attention away from the misogyny that is making us sick in the first place. It's like a sort of smoke and mirrors thing, If we were all on HRT, then we can all behave nicely and look nicely and smile while we're doing all these 5,000 hard things with a nice arse and a nice little pout. And not pay attention to what's making us ill, because most perimenopause symptoms are caused, or at least exacerbated, by gender imbalance. We're chronically stressed all through our adult lives, primarily because we have this sense, be just to the left of ourselves or often front and center that we're not enough, that we're not good enough, that we should be trying harder, that we're not clever enough, that we should be succeeding more, that we should be, and God bless our feminist sisters, of previous generations. But somehow that's got a bit wonky and we've kind of added to the burden, So we're still doing more of the domestics. And when we are in work, we're doing it for less pay. And we're really constantly trying to prove to ourselves, to other people, to something that we are good enough. And this is what is making us ill. So this narrative about HRT just feeds into that. Well, it's like, do you remember the Prime Minister David Cameron? And he said in Parliament once to a shadow cabinet member, "Calm, dear. Oh, do calm down," or something like that. It's like this. "Oh, do calm down, dear."
We don't want to calm down.
There's a lot to be angry about.
Yeah, and I think one beautiful thing about postmenopausal women is that we speak our minds. We don't care anymore what people think, and we're so open. We're challenging. We're motivated. We have fresh ideas, and I do wonder how that changes. I'm going to have a look in the women I've interviewed for the book. I think it's roughly about 50-50 that were on HRT and those that weren't. So I'd love to do some more work around the differences women feel of those that are on HRT and those that are not.
I would love to
But
see
let's
that.
part. Yeah, I think we need to do that. I think that's where we're heading. And as you said, the women before us never had the situation we have now. It wasn't suggested that they should all be medicalized and that this was going to be a terrible problem for them. They just got on with it. And now I think I think it's going to calm down. But at the moment, we've created this huge negativity, and I'm hoping it's going to be balanced. But let's park that and park HRT. So, in your books, now you say a lot about the cycles, about understanding how our lives are cycles of the seasons, and that then we will enter our second spring. Now, this is going to be a big question, asking you to sort of summarize this in one go. But what's the sort of key things? I mean, what everyone needs to do is read your books for sure. So that's the bottom line. It's an advert to go and read Kate's brilliant books and learn much more about this. But if you were doing a pitch about this, what would you say are the cycles of the seasons that women's lives go through?
Yeah, I can do it fast. I've learned to do it fast. So if you think about spring and summer, they're expansive. We want to go out more. We're feeling more worldly and more like we want to see our spirit effective in the world. Autumn and winter, we become more sensitive, more reflective, and we need more quiet time and more rest. So it's natural. All of life does this. Periods of expansion and connection and periods of contraction and sensitivity. And we need these periods of contraction and sensitivity to process, to plan, to let go, to rest, for our bodies to regain equilibrium. This is just how our bodies work. And we see this in the menstrual cycle. So post menstruation is spring, an ovulatory summer, then a premenstrual autumn, and a menstrual winter. But this also operates in our life cycles. So if you take your first period as the beginning of spring, you want to discover the world and find out who you are, and go and discover what you're all about, what the world's all about. And in summer, in your 20s, 30s, receiving validation, and it might be activism, or it might be having babies, or it might be having a career, or you want your spirit to be seen in the world and validated. And then comes perimenopause in its autumn, which is naturally lower energy, more reflective, more sensitive. I mean, everybody listening will attest to the sensitivity of perimenopause, and coming into a menopausal winter. Unfortunately, in our culture, it's only the spring and summer that are celebrated. So it's only the all singing, all dancing, highly estrogenic, hyperproductive, very nice spring and summer that are celebrated. And as soon as we come into a period where actually I don't want to be near you, I just need some time alone, this is pathologized as being bad and wrong. So once we recognize, when I explain this to in when I do talks and speeches and with clients, and I explain this, well, it's normal to be expansive and then to contract. It gives permission for you to care for yourself. It's like, oh, yeah, I really do feel sensitive. And yeah, I need a lot of time, more time alone than I did before. And if you add in neurodiversity, if you add in people who are highly sensitive people, then they're going to need extra time to recover, to figure stuff out, to kind of get into a cave and hibernate during their transition, because after winter there is a second spring. So we're talking about a time when you come out of your cave and you're kind of you're kind of blinking in the light, it's kind of a bit bright, and you're kind of going, well, here I am, I seem to be in postmenopause, and how, but I'm not. It's weird because I don't feel like an old lady.
No.
So how do you do this? Like when you if you think about when you land at sort of 16, say, and your girl's hormones are just kind of settling a bit, that's kind of like second spring. Your hormones are settling and settling and settling and coming to a more stable place post-menopause. But we don't have, culturally, we don't have much of a clue as to how the hell to do that. So it takes a bit of exploration, like wearing different hats, like actual hats. People go and buy shopping for inappropriate clothes to try them on, but also to try on different ways of being. Well, maybe I want to be polyamorous now. Maybe I want to go cold water swimming. Maybe I want to be a potter. Try it all. It's a really exploratory time, which is then followed by a second summer. So then you're coming into that expansiveness, into that action phase. So if you go on any kind of climate protest, or if you go to any kind of climate protest, you will see people in there that would be about 60, between 60 and 70. And you look at their eyes are so alive. They are so clear on what is important to them. And that is second summer. And that is naturally followed by a sort of downsizing autumn, and then a winter as we approach the end of this life. So there's this natural contraction and expansion.
Beautifully put. And yes, so for more details about all of this, please read Kate's books. And in tandem to the seasons, you also talk about the three processes that you explain in the second spring. So separation, surrender, and emergence. Can you just tell us a little bit about these?
Yes, I will. And I'm going to paraphrase this, but these seasons and phases they're kind of like soul longing. Okay. So this is what the inner urge is to do. And of course, life is complicated. Life is messy. And of course, we don't neatly follow the map. It's an archetypal map that gives us clues as to how we can care for ourselves. So if you're like, I get into trouble a lot. People get really furious with me because, I'm post-menopause. Where's this second spring? And then you inquire a bit about their lives, and actually they've been dealing with a bereavement. They've been caring for a parent with Alzheimer's. They've lost their job. They've had a major health crisis, and there's a lot more going on. Life is complicated. So just to caveat that, it's much messier, and this is an archetypal map. So the phases that you mentioned, separation, surrender, and emergence, are processes of change. So separation is when it hurts. That's when you really feel the conflict between what your needs are and what your life is offering you. and it becomes clear that you're going to have to let go and you're fighting it like hell. I have no time. I am so exhausted. That's what that's like. And surrender is when you can actually give yourself that bit of time. Well, maybe I can let myself off the hook a bit. Maybe I can delegate some stuff. Maybe I could go to bed half an hour earlier. You know, it's that kind of, and menopause is asking us to fall in love with ourselves. It's asking us to be our best friends, to really take loving, compassionate care of ourselves. And that surrender part is where you're like, oh, I could really give this to myself now, even when it's just a tiny bit. You know, every increment of kindness counts with this. And the emergence part is, you know, it's often skipped over because it's like, oh, my energy's coming back now. Yeah, I'm feeling really fine, so I'm going to go off and be really helpful and lovely to people. And yeah, finish with all that boring old menopause business. No, I'm over that. I'm so over that. So our natural inclination, and especially given the culture that we live in, is to hop out back into the world, being as busy as we can, as quickly as possible, in which case we burn out again. So this emergent phase is a phase of gathering energy and holding it for ourselves. So that means eating well, letting your energy rise and using it for yourself. Maybe go swimming, maybe paint a picture or make something for yourself, not going to organize a party for a family member and cooking food for 500. And this is so for most women, this is just so challenging. This process of receiving is challenging of itself, but then to keep it for ourselves. And when people are saying, but this is impossible, I've always give, and there's nothing left for me. My response is pretty much uniformly, what kind of old lady do you want to be? Because the quality of care that you give yourself now, that you will have a direct impact on your health in your 60s and 70s and 80s, and maybe determine how long you actually stick around for on this earth. So perimenopause, there's lots of stuff, you do so much good work in understanding what is helpful for people in perimenopause and what is actually happening. But more and more as I age, I see with a bit of perspective that actually it's preparation for being a fantastic old lady.
I love it. I love it. It's when I started doing this work about postmenopause, I was using the word, I was saying it's time to be selfish, but selfish is such a negative word. And what I really mean is what you've just said. It's time for self. It's time for you, for me, and to think about what makes me happy, what's going to be the best things I can do with my life in the next 2 months, 6 months, year, 5 years. And as you said, stop looking after everybody else. Hopefully, if you've had children, hopefully those children are finding their own way now. Obviously, lots of people have marriages, hopefully most of them really successful, and that can be a beautiful time of rediscovering that relationship. But let's talk a little bit more about happiness, because I'm rather obsessed with happiness because I'm a very happy person. And you explained in your books that happiness is U-shaped, and you've talked about how many of us feel this can really be. I don't think people believe us, Kate, but it can be the best time of our life, and you truly embrace aging, and you feel your best self. So, what else can we do to try and convince people that this really can be the best time?
Well, I think it is to see the conventional narrative as the rubbish it is. Like, don't believe the hype. Really, just don't believe it. So I definitely consciously, I mean, you said at the beginning we're both rebels. I will not behave. I will not
No.
conform. And part of that, I think, is finding good role models. So I'm really lucky. I'm the youngest of three girls. I have two older sisters. So they are consistently showing me that they have fun, they're engaged creatively, they have dynamic and alive relationships, they're doing new things, they're following, their whims, they're just having a really good time, having a really good time. So I'm lucky I have them as role models, but also really actively going out and seeking positive role models. So mine are mostly artists. So if you look at Georgia O'Keeffe, if you look at Judy Chicago, if you look at Louise Bourgeois, they are all making art in their post-menopause life that is way better than when they were cycling. Always. Look at Margaret Atwood. Who
Yeah.
doesn't want to be Margaret Atwood?
I definitely
choose your
feel,
role models. Yeah, who are your role models?
well, I definitely feel I am doing my best work now than I ever have. And I have said this publicly at a conference, and I'm going to keep saying it. If I was an employer, I would employ postmenopausal women for sure. We're amazing. And we don't care what anyone says. So we will speak our mind. I think it's so great. And I think what you said about role models, this came up with my podcast I've done with Rachel Peru as well. 20 years ago, there weren't postmenopausal role models for anyone to see anywhere. So we've all got to get out there. We've got to promote those women who are brilliant role models. And I hope that you and I are both role models for some people, but there are others that are role models for us. And I think that's so important. Um, Something else you talk about in your books, and I asked this in the interviews that I did with you and others. So I asked in the interviews, do you feel free? And it was some women really hesitated. Some just said yes in seconds, but some really hesitated because they're looking after people still, and they don't feel free. But in Second Spring, you say that women's freedom is disruptive, and mainstream culture fears the freedom for women. So could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. I think you've named it in that we don't take any bullshit and we say things how they are. And people, that's not popular. And I think that we also have there's a way that our brains change as we age, which gives us a wider perspective. We can see the bigger perspective of things, and that's why so many older people are more engaged in climate change, I think, and in activism. We can also hold our vulnerabilities and our strengths at the same time. Like what I really admire in leaders is when we can show up and say, well, actually, my heart is feeling right tender right now, and this has to happen. That we can hold both, and that is also, it makes people very nervous, I think, who I don't want to be political, but the kind of public school educated white male Tories, basically, that kind of that most of the leaders in our country at the moment have that kind of education, actually from all political parties, and they have been taught to shut down. The model of leadership is that we shut down vulnerability, that we say this is the way, we get the upper hand. It's a very patriarchal, don't feel anything, get the upper hand. But what we do as older females post-menopause is we bring it all to the table, and we have because we have this wider picture, we're naturally inclusive, we're naturally collaborative. And one of the advantages of lower estrogen is that we lose that intra gendered competition. So the competition that, like for mates, for status, that causes so much difficulty and so much anguish, really drops away, because we can work collaboratively and we can see each other's strengths. And I think that gives us an enormous freedom. It really does.
Yeah, and I personally don't want to be around people who all act like me or think like me. I want to be around people who challenge me and give me new ideas and new thoughts. And I've really noticed that happens with, well, women of all ages, but especially the postmenopausal women. We're out there, well, not all of us, but hopefully all of us soon. Now, let's move on to more practical things. So, in both books, you talk about the importance of tracking or charting. So, what does that involve?
Well, it's really simple. It's just noticing your energy levels each day and caring for that. That's all that's required, really. And in the Perimenopause Journal, it has a particular focus. It asks you to notice what season you're in. You know, am I a bit woo, or am I a bit like, really that simple? It's not complicated. The challenge is to, how do I care for that each day? So over time, you grow this library of care. And, you know, it's the complete opposite to a narrative of fear. This is a narrative about care and love and looking after, so that when you look back over the months and over the months and weeks, you see how you have cared for yourself and what's got in the way. You know, we need clarity about how we're tripping ourselves up. So this tracking just helps us to notice how we're caring for ourselves. And if you're interested, you can track with the moon and see if there are patterns within the moon cycle. So lots of people find typically that their sleep is disrupted at the full moon. So just knowing that, you could remember not to schedule in a massive great presentation on the day of the full moon, because you'll be as mad as a bag of frogs. Well, I will be. Personally, you know, everybody's different. You know, everybody does it differently. So for me, I'm pretty strong at this phase of the moon cycle. So around the new moon, this is when I'm pretty solid. I'm pretty on it. You know, that's when luck tends to come into my life, and happenstance and serendipity, and that's when I'm best at doing sort of being public and being out there and being expansive. But you have to, you just have to track and notice your energy for a few months to find these patterns. Also, it helps to remember when you started taking the bloody supplements or changed your diet, and if it's any good, you know, if it works. So that, yeah, practical stuff too.
Yeah, well, our menopause program, as you know, we've called it In Tune because we want women to be in tune with their bodies, and charting and tracking is absolutely part of that. So lots of the women, almost actually vast majority of the women I interviewed for the book, said that alcohol just destroys them. They can't drink. So our bodies are changing, our minds are changing, as you said. So I think checking, maybe you did a certain fitness thing and then actually you realized that evening you weren't feeling well, or you eating certain foods or being with certain people. So I think just keeping that track of your life and what's making you feel great and what's not, and as you said, the moon, I think that's a really good bit of advice, because we are changing. It's called the change. We're changing, and we may have to alter our lives to cope with that. And you've also talked about journaling. So your second book, obviously, it's called the Perimenopause Journal. So journaling is a great thing. Tell us more about why you think journaling is important.
Well, as a writer, that's how I think and how I figure stuff out. So I have it's naturally a place where I would go to. But it's kind of like cut price counseling in a way, because you can say all the unsayable things. And if you don't want, and then you can take the unsayable things and burn them.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of research to show how helpful journaling is. And I think that there's something about, for me, I use a proper pen and paper, and there's something about the flow of ink and the rhythm of it that really helps to settle me. And it kind of clears the top. I have a lot of chaos going on inside my head. I'm sure you can tell listening to this. But it takes off this kind of top layer of chaos so that I can settle and I can get a bit clearer about my intentions. And I work a lot with intention through the months, so that I can check in on where I am with that, having a clear intention that I can come back to. And then again, I can see what gets in the way. Really, really helpful. Yeah, burn it down. Very good for inner
Burn it.
critics,
Yeah.
which
And
endless inner critics.
and let's talk a little bit more about well-being. So we've discussed this a little bit, but you are a big fan of yoga nidra, and I've met many people recently who don't understand. They think it's a new type of yoga class. So can you can you tell us what yoga nidra is and why you think meditation and rest are so important?
Well, as we've discussed, perimenopause and menopause are autumn and wintry times. So they're times when we naturally have lower energy and we need more reflection time. And the yoga nidra kind of does it. What it is a guided, it's a fancy name for a guided meditation. And it's a bit like when you were a little kid, hopefully somebody tucked you up in your really, and you felt really safe with a blanket, and you have that kind of whiskery softness around your neck, and read you a story. It's kind of like that. So it involves a body scan usually, and some imagery, and it works in a particular sequence, and it takes you to a deep level of meditation, and especially for people who don't like meditation, it's really handy. You rest for 20 minutes. So you replenish. So in the yoga nidras that I offer, they're usually nature-based. So they have this affirmation of your cyclical nature. They have this affirmation that rest is okay, that you are deserving of rest, that you are deserving of kindness, you are deserving of slowing your pace, and that's really fine, because spring always comes. So in my work, the seasonal rhythm is always enforced, and you're receiving that in a kind of half awake, half asleep kind of place, and that's where the creative life lives. That's where the newness comes. If you talk to anybody who is involved in a creative venture, that's when the pieces fall together. The pieces come together. They fall into place. So that there are so many benefits, and you get to lie down. What's not to like about that? But I tell you what, my top Nidra tip is to have a flask of tea and some chocolate for afterwards, because otherwise it's really hard to get off the sofa. That's my Nidra place there.
I'm on a chocolate ban, so that's not going to happen. But I'll tell you my yoga nidra story. So Saturday mornings, when I'm not off gallivanting in my camper van, I meet two wonderful people, Joe and Tom, and we go for a swim in a very secluded lake. And there's very rarely anyone walks past, and it's very green, and we hear lots of birds. And then what we started doing is doing a yoga nidra just from YouTube. There's lots on YouTube, but Kate's as well. We need to do one of yours next time. And we lie down on the bank of the lake, and yeah, I normally fall asleep, but it's such a perfect way to have a Saturday morning, and I haven't done it for a few weeks, and I'm really looking forward to doing it very soon. It's absolutely
Beautiful.
the best, beautiful, absolutely the best place. So yes, sit outside, just perfect. Now, away from rest, movement. So you talk a lot about movement in your books. So why do you think movement's important as we age?
Well, there's lots of proven reasons we need to build muscle mass, but moving helps everything. Everything. From your mental health to cardiovascular to your immunity, absolutely everything is improved if you move. The only thing you have to figure out is how to do it in a way that suits you, and notice how you feel. I mean, you referred to it earlier, that there is a change, and sometimes ways that you've exercised or moved in the past may not suit you. So you have permission, when you feel it's appropriate, not to go running around like a lunatic, not to go on a run, but to go on a walk, or to stretch, or to go to Pilates, or dance around the kitchen, or do something that pleases you, because the kind of movement that works is the kind of movement that you want to do. And as we're, I said this earlier, as we're in transition from a body energy perspective, moving the body, you can't stay the same. So, when I'm stuck or full or angry or furious or whatever kind of, if I'm full of something difficult that is impeding my daily life, I go and dance in the garden, or I go and dance in here, or I go and lift weights, or I go to a yoga class. I do anything, go for a walk, go around the block, anything to move, and it shifts.
Yeah, we've both talked a bit now about being outside, and you talk about nature, and we're both a big fan of being outside in nature. So yeah, if you're feeling any of these things, go and move outside. You agree? I think it's well, I know you agree. It's so important for our health and well-being, isn't it, to be outside?
Yes, absolutely. And a lot of the difficulty that we're in the world comes from this fallacy that we're separate from nature. That there's humans and there's nature out there.
No.
And just by going out and tree hugging, just by going out and walking, looking at leaves. And I think the research shows that even looking at photographs of trees has an impact and brings us more into parasympathetic and reduces our stress. So yeah, I think that for ourselves, obviously there's a benefit for being outside, but also for the planet, because we start to see that we're not separate, that our constant consuming has a consequence in the world.
Yeah, totally. It's so good for our mental health. There is a study that looked at a certain type of depression, and it was a randomized study. So they had half the people that took medication and the other half had to go for a walk every day outside. And actually, I haven't read the paper, I've been told about it. I believe that the people that walked outside had a higher improvement in their depression than those that were taking the medication. So go outside, everyone, and enjoy the day. It doesn't matter if it's rainy, enjoy the rain. Rain's wonderful. And you talk a lot about women choosing pleasure, and we should do things, and you've said this already about our movement. We should do things that we love. And I had a boss who said we should only do the work that we enjoyed, which I'm afraid is not quite practical in most working environments. And the thing I hate most at work is marking, and I still have to mark. But you've also said in Second Spring that women should only do things that give them pleasure, otherwise reframe them or delete them. So any advice to those that have got a bit lost on their way of pleasure?
Yeah, I mean, obviously life involves doing kind of tedious tasks, but if when you're doing your marking, you could use your favorite pen. Do you have a pink sparkly pen or a beautiful fountain pen or
Um,
something you could
I'm going to
use?
get well, it's online now. I really objected to it moving online. It was worse
Uh,
for me when it became online. Otherwise, I would have got a lovely sparkly pen,
mm. But
and
can
I have to
you?
have silence. So
Oh, okay. So no music. I mean,
yeah,
for other tasks, you can have your favorite tracks on. You could have wear your favorite perfume. You
I don't
could
wear perfume.
light a candle. You could have you do it in a location that makes you feel particularly good. Looking at a picture you particularly love, have that behind your laptop.
Yeah,
Add
you've made me
in,
think. Yeah, I'm going to get a candle. And also, what I think you've just made me think this. What I'm going to do is make sure after marking, I always go and do something that really gives me pleasure.
yeah,
Even just for maybe I'll always go for a lovely walk after doing the marking. So I've got that to look forward to. Very good, Kate. Look, you've given me a wonderful piece
yeah.
of advice
So
without really knowing.
so associating the difficult task with something pleasurable can get you through it. It's more carroty than sticky.
Yeah,
But if you're
I
washing
love it. I
up,
love it.
you can give your attention to the bubbles. Bubbles are great. Or feel the quality of the warmth of the hot water and feel grateful that we have hot water. I mean, what a privilege to be able to wash up, with
Yeah,
detergent and hot water. We can always bring pleasure in some sense. You have to get
I
creative.
love you. I love you, Kate. The pleasure of washing up.
With the
Yeah.
bubbles. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, go everyone. We can find some pleasure in even the most unpleasurable tasks. Moving away from all the things lovely, post-menopause, life is not all positive, and some women may feel that they need to go and see their doctors. And in Second Spring, you explain how women can prepare, because I think nowadays we do have to prepare. We have this GP thing that you can only talk about one symptom at a time, which obviously doesn't work for women at all. So you give women advice about this in your book. So can you tell us a little bit more about if you're going to see the doctor? things to think about.
Yeah, definitely it helps if you're tracking. If you can come with when the issue started, and I hate rating things out of 10, it's so reductive, but if you can, it helps as a communication device to explain to somebody how severe it is, and like us not, amp it up,
Yeah.
because the way things are at the moment, unless it's a 10, then you're more likely to be dismissed. And of course, this isn't true of all GPs, but I hear a lot that this happens. How long it's been going on for, what's been happening, and also track all the other stuff that you're doing, like how long you've been exercising, what you've been eating, and all those kinds of things as well, and write a list of exactly what you want to say, and brain fog. And if it's a constant irony that when you're unwell and vulnerable, it's the worst time to go and advocate for yourself. So you can take somebody with you, take a friend with you. If you're feeling really wobbly, take a friend with you. There's no shame in doing that. Call in your support people to go in with you, or you can practice write saying what you need to the doctor. And they're very good. Yeah, there's a whole list in Second Spring of advice for that. And also Laura Brydon also has very good ways, she has little inserts in her books of describing what language to use with your physician, with your GP. Very helpful. That's Laura Brydon. We can put her books in the show notes as well.
And I totally agree. Ramp it up. I think we probably sort of, go in quite meekly, and we don't want to concern them, etc. So ramp up whatever. I definitely say this to all my friends. Now, just finally getting back to the positives, you and I, we love women's circles. And you just said then, take a friend with you. I think this is more important than ever at this stage of our lives. It doesn't have to be a big group of people, but you may have some deep friends and some acquaintances, but getting those women's circles together, it's a great way for women to support each other and to not feel alone, which can become a problem as we are aging, and we want to embrace age. So why do you feel women's circles are so important?
Well, as well, sort of, you kind of referenced it in the doctor's appointment. We're like, oh, I'm all right, really, as we're crumbling and suffering underneath. We've been so encouraged to save face that it's really hard for us to get used to owning our vulnerability, and so we feel alone with it. We feel typically really quite isolated. But in spaces with good boundaries, and you need good boundaries in these spaces, you need to know that there's no judgment. You need to know and be assured that one person gets to speak at a time, that you'll be listened to, that it's confidential, for example. So, really good boundaries. And then you arrive in these circles and you go, oh my God, it's not just me.
Yeah.
Everybody else feels like this as well. How astonishing. And there's something about the witnessing and being properly heard that is absolute magic, because it's so rare. It's so rare in our culture to actually listen to people and to really understand and, even ask deepening questions. That doesn't happen. Usually in regular everyday conversations, you say, oh, well, this sad thing happened to me, and somebody responds, well, that sad thing happened to me too, but worse. And in women's circles, there's space for you to feel how you are and really connect. And it's just so precious.
Fantastic. Right, Kate, we're at the end. Just questions that I ask all my guests. So I've called the podcast, Why Did Anyone Tell Me This? So have you got things that women have said to you about, why didn't I know this? Why didn't anyone tell me this before? And what did they ask?
I do. The most common thing is, why did no one tell me I was cyclical? I thought I was mad. Because from one day to the next, one day you're terribly nice and accommodating and competent, and you can do all the things. The next day, everything goes to shit, and you're off. So, human beings are not linear. We are cyclical, and that will, for menstruating people, that will likely be day 21. that happens. And, you know, in perimenopause, definitely that's going to happen. And that's normal and correct. Just
Good.
knowing that it's
Brilliant.
correct. You're cyclical. This stuff happens.
Wise words. So, Kate, final questions. And you've told me this when I interviewed you for my book, but I'm going to ask you again. What makes you happy, and where is your happy place?
Oh, yeah, I can't remember what I said before, but I was thinking about this morning, and I, I, in the last, well, this week, what makes me happy is drawing at my kitchen table, while the sort of hum of domestic life goes on around me. So, sort of chatting with my kids if they're around, or my partner or friends, and there's Radio 6 on, so there's some banging tunes and a bit of chat, and I'm just gently drawing away, and yeah, that's a really nice that's a really nice hum for me.
Fabulous. And the very final question, Kate, what advice would you give your younger self?
That you are absolutely bloody lovable exactly as you are, and you don't need to change.
You
Yeah.
are indeed, Kate. What a brilliant, brilliant way to finish. Kate, thank you. We have had some problems. I was trying to do this on my normal podcast platform, and it's been a bit of a disaster. I don't know what's gone on with that. I'm going to change platforms after today. That's it. So we've done this on Zoom. So I hope it's all come out well for everybody. But Kate, thank you so much. We are embracing age, you and I, and many others. And for those that are not watching on YouTube, Kate is wearing her lovely crone necklace. So, Kate, thank you so much.
Thank you, Joyce. It's always fun chatting with you.
Always, always fun when we're all together. Fantastic. Thank you.